NBC News has learned that, according to U.S. intelligence, Russian military officials have been given the order to go ahead with an invasion into Ukraine. Here's what we know. President Biden held an emergency meeting with the National Security Council today. Intelligence officials reaffirmed that Russia could launch an attack against Ukraine at any time. Close to 200,000 Russian troops are amassed at the border with Ukraine, and as many as 50% of those troops are said to be in an attack position. At least 2 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed as incursions on both sides ramp up. But the rhetoric out of the Kremlin is still deny, deny, deny. Here's the Russian ambassador to the U.S. just this morning.
There is no innovation, and there is no such plans.
Sorry, what? The official party line and the literal troops on the ground are telling a very, very different story. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is penciled in to meet with his Russian counterpart this week. But that all depends on Russia keeping the peace.
While the die may be cast, until it actually settles, until the tanks are rolling and the planes are in the air, that we're going to try everything we possibly can to get President Putin to reverse the decision we believe he's made and to dissuade him. Part of that is the prospect of massive sanctions.
Now, folks, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but this invasion seems to be a matter of not if, but when. So what are we waiting for? World leaders say they're armed to the hilt with a barrage of sanctions, and Ukrainian President Zelensky is urging countries to act now, before war breaks out. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman David Cicilline, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He recently visited Ukraine with other members of Congress. Welcome, Congressman. Just to you, off the top, you've just been in Ukraine as part of your congressional CODEL, the trip to Ukraine. Tell us about that experience and what insights did you come away with that gives you some more interesting insights in the current situation?
Well, thanks for having me on. Our trip to Ukraine was led by the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. It was a bipartisan delegation, and we were there really to reaffirm our strong support for the Ukrainian people and their right to decide their own futures. And I was there in 2014, right after the Maidan uprising, when there was still fire burning in the Maidan, and they had driven out the puppet president that was leading Ukraine. And it's a very different country today. This is a really functioning democracy. They've made tremendous progress on electoral reforms, on corruption, on building an economy. And I think the single greatest threat Ukraine poses is that they're a functioning and thriving democracy on Russia's border. And the Russians look over and think, why can't we have those freedoms? And so I think Vladimir Putin has a real problem, because Ukraine is on its border as an example to Russians about what life can be like in a democracy. And the Ukrainian people are prepared to fight for their country. They're obviously outgunned by the Russian military, but their NATO, the European allies, the United States, are helping them with lethal support, with ammunition, armaments, training, sharing of intelligence. We're going to do everything we can to provide assistance to them to fight and defend their country. And look, this is, as one woman said, we've tasted freedom. We're not going back. These are people that are prepared to be in this fight and to defend their country against the aggression of Vladimir Putin. And hopefully he understands the entire international community is going to impose devastating, crippling sanctions that are going to ruin his economy, bother the oligarchs that surround him. And the hope is to prevent him from actually engaging in this military excursion, because he understands what the impact will be of those sanctions.
So, Congressman, given what you just said and the amassing of troops along the Ukrainian-Russian border, is there any hope of a diplomatic solution here or resolution?
Well, I think the Biden administration is exactly right. They're going to continue to work every possible avenue and make it clear that diplomatic off-ramps are always available, that Vladimir Putin, until he actually has tanks rolling in or troops going in, there's still an opportunity to avoid what will be a catastrophic war and will result in tens of thousands of people potentially dying. This is a war of choice, not a war of necessity. But it's important that the United States and the international community make it clear no country can redraw the borders of another country by force. I mean, we fought 2 world wars. NATO was designed in response to fears of Russian aggression. It's a defensive organization. And so it's important that this conduct not be permitted. And I think the president has worked very closely with our allies, with our NATO allies, our European allies, to be sure that everyone's on the same page, prepared to impose crushing, really devastating economic sanctions on Vladimir Putin and his cronies if they, in fact, go forward with this action.
So you mentioned sanctions. President Zelensky has accused global leaders of appeasing Russia, and he's calling for sanctions to be issued before Russia goes to war. Is that something the U.S. should be looking at as well?
I don't think so. Look, there's been a lot of discussion about that, but it's important to remember sanctions are designed to deter action. The threat of sanctions is to prevent someone from taking an action. I think most people have concluded that if you impose the sanctions already, Vladimir Putin will say, well, I've already received the punishment. Why not go ahead with the military action? And secondly, he might even say, look, that imposition of sanctions, I consider an act of war. You started this. Now I'm going to defend my country, and we're going to move into Ukraine. So I don't think we want to give him that opportunity. We want to make it very clear if he does it, they will be imposed. But the whole idea is to prevent him from doing it and to deter the action. And I think imposing sanctions might actually provoke him to go forward.
I want to get your take on something that I personally consider to be somewhat disturbing. It's being reported that Fox News and Tucker Carlson are working to secure an interview with Vladimir Putin. The Daily Beast reports the Kremlin representatives actually think this would be a good thing for Putin. You've got to be frustrated as a member of Congress and, who has the intelligence and understanding of what's going on with Russia. You and your colleagues, the president, have to be frustrated when you're seeing this type of effort being made by Fox News and Tucker. How do we begin to respond to that? What does it say that you have people like Tucker Carlson and Fox News drumming up support for Putin?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's not frustrating. It's sickening. It's un-American. This is the same man who said, why aren't we supporting Russia in this conflict? Russia and Ukraine, they're both foreign countries. I mean, the absurdity of not recognizing one of them as a democracy where people have elected to turn to the West and they don't want to be part of Russia. And the other is a thuggish dictator. And the idea that he thinks they're the same is preposterous. This is the same person who went to Hungary to interview Viktor Orban. Now he wants to talk to Putin. I guess, like, for his encore, he'll have Duterte from the Philippines. I mean, it's shocking. It's embarrassing. He ought to be ashamed of himself. And this is a person, Vladimir Putin, who is trying to destabilize Europe, to undermine the NATO alliance, the security architecture that has kept the world at peace, and who stands in contrast to democratic values of freedom and this, sovereignty of individual nations. So he ought not be given an audience on any American television. But this is, a continuation of the propaganda machine of Fox. So it's not surprising, but really, really disappointing.
Congressman David Cicilline, thank you so much for taking a moment to be with us this evening. Appreciate it very, very much. It's a date. Senate Democrats have set an ambitious deadline to confirm President Biden's Supreme Court nominee. More on that.